Hi friends, this is Ray from Honey Top Bees. Today, I'm going to show you how I do a Demaree split. Demaree, I don't even know how it's pronounced properly, but I've been doing it for a while, and a lot of you have asked, Ray, how do you do it? So I'm going to show you how I do it today. Join me and let's go through it step by step. I'm going to make it as simple as possible so that maybe you can explore this method of getting more honey with less hives. And
Coming up,
to make emergency queen cells. You can't skip this next step. All right, so I'm going to walk you through step by step how I do a Demaree split. There are different little nuances that I sometimes do depending on the hive and the hive strength, etc. I'm going to put all that stuff aside, and I'm just going to go through the basic core principles of the Demaree split today so that you can learn how to do it. So let's jump in and get started. Step number one for me starts well before I'm even doing the Demaree split. So as my bees come out of winter, the very first thing that I like to do is this. If I'm coming out of winter with a deep and a medium box, I don't really know where my queen necessarily is at this point, but as long as I have some brood in that bottom box, what I like to do early in the year is get my queen, find my queen, put my queen in the bottom box. Now again, there needs to be some brood down there because we want to have some bees that are going to surround her and keep her warm. This might be late February for me in my area of the country. So you're going to have to kind of take it in mind as I give you dates that I'm in South Carolina. We have mild winters. Things start to warm up late February, early March. And so as I reference some time frames, you're going to have to kind of make an adjustment depending on where you live in the country or even in the world. But what I like to do early on, and this is my first step, is get my queen and put her in the bottom and get her to lay out this bottom box, because this is eventually going to be the box that I move in the Demaree split. Step number two is going to be to gather my equipment. So as I get closer to the time that I'm actually going to do the Demaree split, I'm going to need some additional equipment. In particular, I'm going to need a queen excluder, which I already have here. There are some people that use 2 queen excluders in a Demaree split. I don't do that, I just use 1. I'm going to need to have another deep box and at least 1 medium super to start. And then eventually I'm going to probably need another medium super or maybe even 2 more medium supers, depending on how it goes. So I need to make sure that I have these. Now, it's always best if you have drawn comb. I'm probably going to repeat that 3 or 4 times in this video. I have learned that if you start with foundation, it will work. It just takes the bees longer. It can take them a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to draw out all of that comb. And you can miss a lot of the nectar flow during that time, or the queen will not have a place to lay while they're drawing out that comb. So Demaree splits, in my opinion, work better when there is drawn comb, if you can start with drawn comb. But don't freak out if you don't have drawn comb and you just have empty foundation. It can still work. It's just probably not going to work as well for you. The only other thing I'm going to need is a queen clip, and I'll show you that next. Step number 3 is choose the right time to do your Demaree split. I'm going to talk about this more in the next video where I talk about reasons why the Demaree split can fail. Hey, this is Ray. If you'll take a moment and hit like and subscribe, for a couple of reasons. First of all, I would appreciate it, but secondly, there's going to be a second part to this video where I go over everything that can go wrong with a Demaree split, and so that you can kind of look out for some of those things. And that part is coming next week, so subscribe now so that you can watch that when it comes out. If you do it too early and the temperatures are too cold and you're separating your brood nest as you do in a Demaree split, there cannot be enough bees in there to maintain the temperature that that brood needs in order to thrive. And sometimes you can get chill brood, which will kill some of the brood, and then you really haven't done anything but just created a mess. You've got to choose the right time. And for me, choosing the right time is when this brood box is pretty much full of brood and maybe a little bit of resources that are in there. But again, because you're doing this early in the season, you shouldn't have a lot of nectar in here, new nectar anyway, and you should have, some pollen in here, but it shouldn't be packed out. But as soon as this brood box gets to be full, then it's time to do your Demaree split. Now what I do, because I already have my queen in the bottom, is go to step number 4, which is find the queen. So step number 4 is to find the queen. So by putting that queen excluder on, like I showed you in the first step, I have forced her to lay out this bottom box as opposed to laying in the medium box that was on top of it. And so this gives me a real advantage when it comes to reconfiguring my hive in a Demaree split. So I'm going to go through my hive, and at this point, this is what I would like to have. I've got all brood here, and maybe I'll have some honey on the outside or pollen, depending on how the bees stored things in this bottom box. I'll go through my bottom box, I'll find my queen, I will clip her. I like to use these metal queen clips. You got to be careful with them. They can slice a queen in half, but if you're careful and you go slow, you can put her in here, or you can pick her up by hand. I do that too, but I need to put her aside for a few minutes, so that's why I prefer to use a clip. So I'm going to take that queen and put her in a safe place. Let's move on. What do I do next? Well, the next thing that I do is I take one frame of brood out of this bottom box and I set it aside. There are differing opinions right here as to whether you should have capped brood or open brood. I've tried it both ways. Honestly, I can't say as though it really has made a difference either way. I can see the advantages for both. If you go with that sealed brood, it's about to hatch out. All of those nurse bees will be right down there next to the queen. If you go with open brood, then the nurse bees are going to stay with that open brood and they're going to be down there around the queen. So I don't know as though it really makes a difference. Some people say put one open and one sealed. You could do that as well. But what I usually do is take one frame of brood. Now I'm going to take this box, which has the rest of my brood in it, and I'm going to take it off of the hive and set it aside. And now I'm going to take my empty deep, again, preferably with drawn comb, and I'm going to put it on the bottom. I'm going to pull out the middle frame. I'm going to take that frame of brood, capped brood or uncapped brood, and put it in the center. And then I'm going to take my queen and I'm going to put her back down here in this bottom box. And then I'm going to take my queen excluder and put it right here. Now, I can't emphasize enough the importance of temperature. I think I already talked about it. I'm sorry. I think I'm repeating myself. Someone said on YouTube, don't repeat yourself. But I just need to emphasize that if you do this and you're still having a bunch of cold nights, then you're probably doing it way too early. I like to make sure that the temperature is going to be able to be maintained inside of the hive. The bees like to have that brood at that 90 to 95 degree mark inside the hive. So temperature is a big factor for the success of a Demaree, but I'm going to talk about that more in my second video. So at this point, I have my queen in the bottom box with one frame of brood and a bunch of empty frames, preferably drawn comb. Queen excluder above that. What do I put on top of this? Well, now I'm going to return my second box that I overwintered right above the brood box on the bottom where the queen is. If you don't have one of these and you were just overwintering with a single deep, then you just leave this off completely. But usually for me, I have a box here. This could have some brood in it because the queen was laying in it prior to me putting her down in the bottom. This could have some honey in it, could have some pollen in it, some overwintering resources, or it could be primarily emptied out from the winter. It could be any of those things. If it's relatively full, I'm going to not only add this above the queen excluder, I'm going to also add another empty honey super above the queen excluder. And now I'm going to take my original brood box, okay, with all my frames of brood here, capped, uncapped, doesn't matter. And I am going to put it on top of my empty honey super. Above that, I will put my inner cover. And I want to talk for a second about an upper entrance. There's an advantage and a disadvantage to an upper entrance here. Some people like to leave the upper entrance open. And the reason why is there could be some drone brood in this box. The drones are not going to be able to get below that queen excluder. This gives the drones a way to escape. But whether you leave this open or not is your choice. But the one thing I think I would say is I do not suggest putting like a vented inner cover, if you know what that is. I use those vented inner covers on a lot of my videos. You'll see them in the summer, July and August, because it's so hot and humid here. But I do not put a vented inner cover on when I'm doing a Demaree split. I want to keep the temperature inside of this box in early spring as warm as possible. Put my top cover on, and there you have it. Let me just review. I have an empty box of drawn comb, one frame of brood in the middle, and the queen. This was the rest of my overwintering box that I had on my hive. It could have some brood in it, it could have honey in it, doesn't really matter, it could be mostly empty. This is an empty super. This is a full super of brood, with the exception of one frame that I had pulled out to put down here in the bottom. That frame is empty in the middle. The bees will draw that out pretty quick. So what we have done here with this hive is we have maintained the workforce that the hive was creating for the spring nectar flow, but we've moved it up here to the top. We've created all this empty space, empty, maybe empty, definitely empty. We've created all this empty space, which is going to reduce the swarming instinct for the hive. But we've maintained all of this brood here at the top, which is going to create, when the nectar flow hits, you're going to have this huge workforce of bees to be able to really optimize foraging and honey processing for you. Again, the key to this is it reduces swarming, and you can create more honey with less hives. Now, the next step is really important, so let me go on to it now. If you miss this step, it can mess the whole thing up. Because there is such a distance between this bottom box and this brood box here at the top, it's very difficult for the queen's pheromone to be transmitted that far through this beehive. And because you're not going to have this large number of bees in the middle to transmit that pheromone, these bees at the top are going to feel like they are queenless. They are going to take any available young larva and they're going to make emergency queen cells. You can't skip this next step. After 4 to 6 days, you have to come into this top box here and remove any queen cells that are in there. And you can't miss one. You've got to brush the bees off, shake the bees off, or just look super carefully and make sure you destroy all of these cells that are up here, all of the queen cells that they're going to make. It is pretty much 100% guaranteed that they are going to make queen cells up here. So it's not like it might happen to you or might not happen to you, it's going to happen to you. Now, alternatively, I suppose if you wanted to make a split, you could pull one of these frames off that had a queen cell and move it off into a 2-frame mating nuke, etc., and use that queen cell to make a split. But again, pulling brood off of here is going to kind of defeat your purpose. If you start pulling, several frames out of here, you might as well have not done a Demaree split. You might as well have just done a regular split. So don't miss that step. Go in and remove these queen cells. This is kind of what I wanted to build up to, that I have discovered this year for the first time. If you repeat this process 2 or 3 times in the spring, you can create a really massive hive that can produce a lot of honey. On some of my hives this year, I did 2 Demaree splits or 3. So what does that mean and what does it look like? Let me explain. After, say, 2 weeks of time, most of this brood here, 14 to 21 days at the most, but most of this brood is going to have hatched out. And at that point, this bottom box where the queen is should be mostly full of brood. At that point, you can take and move some of the brood that is here back up to the top box and repeat it. You could just move 5 or 6 frames of brood from the bottom up to the top and take 5 or 6 empty frames and put them down here in the bottom. You've got to leave your queen down here below the queen excluder. And if you put brood up here at the top, you've got to come back in 5 to 6 days and remove those queen cells again. So it takes some diligence on our part as beekeepers to make it work. Alternatively, if you didn't want to move some frames, you could just leave this box here and do the same thing all over again. But your hive is going to be getting really big at that point. But you could take another empty deep box, put it here, take this brood, move it to the top. And that will create even a larger workforce. The larger workforce that you have, the more honey your hive is going to be able to produce. I had some hives that last year I only got 1 super off of. This year I would get 4 or 5 supers of honey off of them because I did the Demaree split in 2 or 3 different phases, I guess is what I'll call it. I don't really know what else to call it, so we'll call it 3 different phases, where I kept moving empty frames down to the bottom and the brood frames up here to the top. My hive got really large. It got like 9 or 10 feet in the air. It got really huge at its peak. But once I pulled the honey off, I had a good sized hive, and then when the honey flow was done, I was able to split that hive very easily because it was still a very super strong hive. So you can do this more than 1 time in the spring. So that's how I do a Demaree split. Encourage you to give it a try. It may be too late, it depends on where you live. It may not be too late this year for you. Maybe something you want to plan on doing next spring. Again, watch for my second video. I'm going to talk about why your Demaree split can fail, which is going to give you some real tips of some things that I have learned, mostly by trial and error, of how I failed at Demaree splits in the past. But I encourage you to give it a try. It's really not that difficult. I watched a lot of videos before I did my first Demaree split, and I kept getting really confused, and it just seemed like it just wasn't super clear. But the principles are just really basic. It's leave the queen down here with an empty box, move the brood to the top, empty supers in the middle. That's all the basics. And then make sure you come back in and clean those queen cells up 5 or 6 days later. That's really all you need to know. It's not as difficult as it sometimes seems. Now, I know there are a bunch of different ways to do Demaree splits. It's one of those things where we always joke as beekeepers, if you ask 10 beekeepers for their opinion on how to do something, you'll get 11 different answers. And the Demaree split is certainly no exception. There's a lot of nuances, and people have different ways that they like to do it, and of course everybody's way is the best way. So if you have some ideas about how you like to do a Demaree split, maybe some things that you have learned and like to share with other people, please put them down in the comments so that the other people in the community can learn from your experience as well. So if you haven't done it yet, give it a try this next year. If you have done it, I hope maybe something that I shared with you today will help you to do it. If you have additional comments, please leave them down below. God bless, and I will see you on the next video.